Welcome back to Atlanta for Citrus TV's coverage of Syracuse in the Final Four, the day after SU lost to Michigan 61-56. I'm Heather Prusak alongside Chris Lewis. And Chris, disappointing way to end the season, but in the end, Coach Boeheim seems very happy with his team.
Yeah, there's no good way to end a season in college basketball unless you're one team or you're the team that wins the NIT that nobody really cares about. For Syracuse, though, a team that made it to the Final Four, the players said after the game, not many people expected them to get this far.
And for the players, that's really all you can ask for, the postseason run. We'll get more to that later, but first, let's head over to Coach Boeheim. He seemed very, very pleased with his team for everything this season.
These guys have accomplished. It's hard to see it. I told them that they won't see that and they should feel bad because they, obviously could have won this game, but what they've accomplished is I think incredible this year. I don't think I've ever been any prouder of a team for where they've come and what they've had to overcome at the end of the year and in this particular game.
So Chris, Coach Boeheim, there's a lot that he could have been disappointed with and a lot that he could have hit on, but really taking the positive route there on his players.
Yeah, one of the things he could have been disappointed in is the way his seniors played. Both James Sutherland and Brandon Trish had subpar games for themselves, but Brandon Trish over his Syracuse career has been Mr. Consistency. This guy came in as a freshman, started every game he's ever played as a part of the Syracuse Orange, and hey, all good things have to come to an end.
I think our energy was a little bit low. We needed to be more active, and we weren't. I think that was the biggest thing.
So as you mentioned, Chris, earlier, Brandon Trish started every game since he was a freshman, and pretty big accomplishment for him out of Jamesville DeWitt even.
Yeah, he's a local guy, so that's one thing he has going for him. Came in, started every game, and not only that, he's played the most games ever for a Syracuse player, the all-time winningest player for Syracuse. I mean, those are accomplishments. It's almost storybook. A guy who grew up watching college basketball at Syracuse. His uncle, Howard Trish, played in an orange jersey. For him to accomplish all that he has, it makes it sad that you won't see him ever play for Syracuse again.
Well, now let's head over to the season as a whole. We can talk about the players individually, but let's start breaking down some of these games. And you can really break down the season into three parts. Starting with the beginning, you had that epic game on the aircraft carrier in San Diego.
Well, epic, maybe not, considering the shooting in that game was absolutely abysmal.
Well, the atmosphere
it was still
a
cool event to be there and be able to see all the pageantry that went along with it, and that spurred Syracuse another hot start to the season before the first loss to Temple. But it really seemed like another typical Syracuse start where everything was going well. You remember Jim Boeheim around that time picking up win number 900, win 903 to pass Bob Knight on the career wins list, become the second active winningest coach in college basketball. That's pretty impressive.
And normally you don't consider the non-conference games to be something to remember, but really a special time for Coach Boeheim and the rest of the team. But now heading over to the middle part of the season we talked about, that's where things started to get a little shaky when you had James Sutherland out for a suspension. Not a lot of positives you can take out of that for Syracuse.
Academic ineligibility, and that really hampered the Cuse. Remember, in the non-conference slate, James Sutherland had a 35-point game against Arkansas. It just goes to show you how important he was to this Cuse team. You take him out, defenses started collapsing in. That's where the losses started to pile in. You had Villanova in that stretch, Pitt lost. And then even when James Sutherland came back, it still had some tough, rough patches, getting everything back in the flow. That's where losing 4 out of the last 5 games, including twice to Georgetown, those weren't the pretty days, especially on offense for the Cuse team.
Especially that last game of the season, only 39 points at Georgetown. Not a way that you want to end the regular season going into the postseason. But now, heading over to the third part of this season, that's where things started to really click for the Orange.
The postseason, the Big East tournament is where it began. And now, if you could just picture to where you were about a month ago, your attitude of this Syracuse team. They had just lost to Georgetown, scoring just 39 points. Nobody thought this was coming. In fact, in the Seton Hall game, the first game of the Big East tournament, Syracuse was down in that one. But open up James Sutherland. He all of a sudden caught fire from behind the arc. His 3-pointers helped Syracuse win that. To me, the shining moment from the season will be that Georgetown game in the Big East tournament. The way Syracuse played, they fought, got the lead. Georgetown came back, but the Cuse made it to overtime and was able to pull it out to make it to the final.
And that really set the tone then going into the NCAA tournament, where started off, blew out Montana, and then from there really went up for Syracuse. Specifically, you got to talk about that Indiana game, taking out a #1 seed, a team coming into that averaging 80 points per game.
When you're a 4 seed and you make it to the Final Four, that means you've had to have pulled an upset somewhere along the line. And for Syracuse, it was against Indiana. When the Cuse was in San Jose, they played a couple of teams in Montana and Cal that really didn't have an offensive resume going into that game. Indiana was the complete opposite. Cody Zeller, Victor Oladipo. These guys are all Americans, and Syracuse just stifled them. They were lost on offense. That 2-3 zone really started to generate the headlines the way they played against Indiana, and then Marquette the next game later, Syracuse stopped them to get to the Final Four.
Kind of like a Syracuse revenge tour going into their postseason, beating Georgetown, beating Marquette, getting some revenge from the regular season even, and then going into, you had the Michigan game, a little disappointing, but all in all, Coach Boeheim, you heard him say, very, very impressed with this team.
You had one more chance for revenge, I guess, if Syracuse could have beaten Michigan. Had a chance to face Louisville in the championship game, avenge a late season, regular season loss, and then the Big East tournament loss. But hey, you're a 4 seed, you made it to the Final Four. Unfortunately for the Cuse, ran up against a very good Michigan team and kind of woke up a bit too late. A slow starting first half where the energy was down. Picked it up in the second half, but just ran out of time.
Syracuse able to get within 1, but then just ran out of gas at the end there.
Yep, Syracuse down in the Final Four to Michigan, 61-56 the final score. So the Cuse's run, the road ends in Atlanta, just like the motto says on the court. She's Heather Prusak. I'm Chris Lewis. Thank you so much for tuning in to the coverage on CitrusTV.net of Syracuse in the Final Four.